video, I wanted to talk about using sounds and also musical instruments in shamanic work. There will be another video covering more general use of tools in shamanic work, but here we're focusing on sounds and how can you use them in shamanic practice. A quick note that most of the notes and comments will be based on my experience and my approach. It does not mean that this is practiced in any specific tradition. Let me start from introducing you to my rattle, and I do have a couple of rattles. This one is very special to me as well. It's got a jaguar here at the front and a spirit of a frog at the back. The way I use rattle is usually opening up sacred space and closing the sacred space. It's the sound that I establish with spirit world in terms of calling them and letting them know that I need them for the work that I'm doing. It's almost as whenever I use the rattle sound, it's like this ringtone that they can recognize. You don't have to use that as your sound, but I think the good thing is to do in your practice is to establish sound that spirits will recognize, that as soon as you use it, there is a certain calling. I use rattle for that. The other reason why I use rattle for it is because it's really easy to make hand movement with the rattle. And when I open sacred space, when I call onto spirits, I like to make big 3 circles in honor of Great Mother Earth, Father Sky, and the ancestors. And then I like to, so I do these big circles. And then I also do a movement from the bottom to the top to connect me to the 3 worlds, which is the lower, the middle, and the upper world. Rattle is amazing for that. It really works with your movement. If you like to sort of incorporate that in your practice, it's got beautiful high vibrational sound. And it's also small, which means it's easy to carry. If I have to open a space somewhere or if I have to call into spirits, I don't always need to carry my big drum to do that. The other way I use rattles as well in a general work is also closing the space. It's the same sound that I sort of use to say, okay, now I'm ending communication with you and I'm ending my work, purposeful work with you. There will be more uses, but I will get to that just in a moment. So here is my very special baby. One of my main drums that I use in my work, and this one was made in Siberia by Serbian artists. It's got depiction of the lower, the middle, and the upper world. It honors the spirit of the deer. It honors the grandfather sun, grandmother moon. It's just so much going on in here that I might have to take another good 5-10 minutes just to introduce you to my drum. And the backing here is beautiful as well. It's got the special ribbons that have a meaning as well, mostly for protection. But what I wanted to really tell you about how I use drum and sound in my work is it really helps me with journeying. It really helps me to travel to different dimensions, to communicate with the spirits, and to get into trance. So the way I use that in my practice is mostly in journeying. It's mostly in communication with spirits and getting into a trance and really putting myself into an alternate state of consciousness. That's what the sound of the drum really does for me. Again, there will be other uses, I'll get to it. And finally, I just love my flute and I use it pretty much all the time in my shamanic work. And what the flute does for me is really brings me back to the middle world, roots me back and anchors me to the earth. So for example, if you can just picture for a second, I would open the space with a rattle and I would call into spirits. I would then use my drum to transport me into different dimensions and to really allow me to get into certain state of mind and state of spirit. And when I return and when I come back, I use flute to really anchor me back into my body, into the earth. So the sound of the flute is really the sound of the earth for me. There will be a couple of more uses and I'll get to it just in a moment. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about how I use sound in my healing work. As a shamanic practitioner, as a medicine woman, a lot of my work focuses on helping people, really helping their energy to come back into balance and harmony. And I use sound a lot. A lot of the times I will use sound that comes from within me, from my body, but I will also rely a lot on my tools if I can, if I have them nearby. And again, I use these sounds in a different ways, and I've established my connection to them, but it doesn't mean that you'll have to repeat exactly the same thing, but maybe it will give you some ideas. When I use my drum, I use it for a lot of the times breaking someone's blockages and energy. So when I start healing, and especially if it is for somebody that hasn't had any shamanic sessions, or they come with a lot of baggage, they come with a lot of energies, maybe even entities or some blockages, drum will be amazing to really break through that first layer. So I use a lot of that for this, almost like breaking through that thickness of dark energies and getting into the essence. It's also a great tool for carrying energies. I feel like most of my shamanic extractions and releases happen when I use drum. So as I'm breaking this energy, as I'm connecting with the spirits, as I'm merging with the spirit, that's where the deepest heavy extractions happen, is when I use drum. So that's why I have such a strong, powerful connection to my drum, because I think drum is pretty much the most transformative of the sounds for me out of all of them. It's the sound that is the most profound, it's the sound that has got the strongest power, is the trance that enables me to merge with the spirit like none of the other sounds. And that is just personally for me, but for you it could be completely something else. So drum is beautiful for that. And especially if you're familiar with soul retrieval or any work that requires going into the underworld, I really, really recommend working with drum for that. Going back to the rattle, I'll use a different rattle here just as a different example. I call that my water rattle, and it's got this beautiful spirit of the lizard here, and it's just really, really amazing for gentle cleansing, and it works really beautifully with the spirit of the water. So once I do, for example, a really deep extraction and I remove what needs to remove, I use rattle to really gently purify the rest of the body and the rest of the spirit. It's really a connection for me to, in some way, to the middle world. Doing cleansing on that level, it's absolutely amazing. Very often I have a lot of visions as well when I use that rattle, and a lot of messages will come through from my guides, either for me or for the patient that I'm working with. This would be a really great sound for me in that particular stage of healing. And then I have a more kind of high pitched sound that I use when I move into a stage of connecting a client, patient, or person into more upward energies, where I'm trying to connect myself and the person into spirit of Tengri, or to the kind of divine energies and higher self. So we're really talking about really high vibrational spirits and energies. So for that, I actually use either harmonica, so just a very simple harmonica. There are different types. Now I will play that intuitively. I should have said that at the beginning of the video, that I'm definitely not a musician and I have no idea how to really play most of the instruments. But I will use that intuitively, and I will use that in a way where I'm being guided in terms of the sounds of how to tune in person into certain vibrations. So it's interesting how often it starts in a one key and then it ends in another key, and it has a slightly different rhythm, and then it changes in the middle. I use it very intuitively, but it's a really beautiful way to connect you to these high spirits and highly evolved energies. So I recommend that. Alternatively, I will use as well mouth harp. This one is a Siberian one. It's just such a beautiful craft. You probably cannot see it from far away, but it's a beautiful mouth harp. Just got this kind of really trance-like sound and vibration, and I would use that sometimes instead of harmonica. It's a bit harder to play, harder in terms of your actual mouth and teeth. You have to practice a little bit to really get comfortable with that. And then I usually come back to a rattle. So again, probably I would use the first rattle that I showed you to bring the person back to the body, to ground them again, And sometimes I would use a flute as well. So this is usually towards the end of my healing process in the more sort of standard cases. This is sort of like bringing a person back home. There's a lot of symbolism in a rattle. There's a lot of symbolism in the flute. Rattles, good rattles are filled with seeds, so there is a lot of earth. There is this kind of belly shape as well. Just really coming home is really having that opportunity to be rebirthed. And if you look at the flute, it's got obviously this phallic shape, it's masculine. So even sometimes when I use both at the end of the process, it's almost like bringing the union between feminine and masculine and giving the opportunity for something new to be born, for a person to go through rebirth. It's a kind of journey that we usually go with my client on, first with the drum, then rattle again, cleansing, then going into that high vibrational space to seeking a new destiny, a new path, a new realignment to really getting that life force, and then coming back into the earth again and being able to be reborn through use of these sounds. I use that just as an example in a typical healing session or healing process. Of course, there's so many different ways depending on the individual in case, but I wanted to sort of give you some inspirational ideas of how you can work with the sound as a shamanic worker. There's one more thing I wanted to mention with the sound, especially if you are already familiar with the concept of lower, middle, and upper world, and if you're working with spirits from either one of them or all of them, I recommend you finding a sound as well that would really resonate with each of the worlds. So it's almost like this doorbell that you establish that spirits will know that you're trying to open a gate. And for me, the drum would be resonating with the lower word and the spirit of the Erlich. Flute and rattles resonate for me with the middle word and the Mother Earth, Umai, and the harmonica or the mouth harp will resonate for me with the upper world, with the spirit of Tengri or Ulgen. This is just my way of working with the sound. It really can vary from person to person, from tradition to tradition. I actually know that some traditions use rattle to connect to the upper world because of that higher pitch. But the bottom line here is that you start experimenting with sounds and open yourself to different musical instruments, to different ways of using sound. You don't have to be a musician to play. I am actually the worst person to play any instruments, but somehow I make my way through it. And especially when you turn on your intuition and really allow spirits to be channeled through you, it's not really about creating a beautiful melody. It's really about sounds and vibration to be channeled. And that's the way I would encourage you to work. You can make sounds with anything. You can grab two stones and see whether you can make some nice consistent sound that you can go into a trance with. You can use wooden sticks, you can make your own rattle, you can use any other instrument. I would love to hear actually from you whether maybe you already working with the sounds, or maybe you have something that you've been using in your practice and you haven't just realized that this is sort of your way of connecting to the spirit world. Or if you haven't worked with sounds yet, perhaps you can share what you felt inspired by and what would you like to try next. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you found this video perhaps inspiring, or maybe it gave you just a couple of ideas what you could do in your practice, and maybe it will make you more open to working with sounds. If you are interested more in the topics that goes in depth about shamanic tools and the symbolism and mystical meaning behind them, I might make another video about it. But for now, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. I'm so blessed to have you here, and I'm wishing you a wonderful day. Lots of love, stay present, stay joyful, and hope to see you soon again. Bye.